Morning pottery and artists. In this video we're going to look at painting a very thin warm yellow glaze onto any subject in order to warm it up and to give it more potency. See you in the next clip. Hi, I'm Alison Fennell, the pottery and artist. Welcome to my regular viewers, and if you'd like to become a subscriber, just click the little red box in the bottom right hand corner of the screen and then click the grey bell and make sure your mobile phone will receive YouTube notifications. So in this video today we're going to look at painting on top of a already dried painting, maybe an old painting you've got kicking around that you feel looks a bit sort of flat and dead and doesn't have enough colour, and you want to sort of zhuzh it up a bit, give it a bit more zip. So what we're going to look at is painting a glaze onto a subject. Watercolourists have used glazing for centuries, and it's a way of applying a very thin dilute wash layer of paint onto a subject that's already bone dry. So let's have a look at doing that now in this video. The best paints for mixing glazes are transparent paints. When you buy watercolour paints, there's normally a manufacturer's chart on the internet, or it might actually say on the side of the tube its transparency rating. So if you want very transparent glazes, buy transparent paints. You can put a glaze on using slightly opaque paints as well. You just won't get such a fine luminous effect, but you will get an effect. So the paint I'm going to use today is a yellow, a mid-yellow. It's Winsor Yellow by Winsor & Newton. So let's see what that does. Let me just show you some Winsor & Newton tubes to explain this transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque and opaque classification that they use. So first of all, this is a tube of burnt umber, and if I look on the back, there's a white square. Well, it's a square, it's an empty square, and that means it's transparent. Then I've got Winsor Yellow, as I mentioned. If I look on the back of Winsor Yellow, there's this an empty square with a line through it. That symbol means semi-transparent. Then if I move on to a tube of Winsor Orange, if we look on the back now, we've got a square that's half empty and half black, and that means it's semi-opaque. And then last of all, if I look at a tube of Cadmium Yellow Pale, it's got a full black square, which means that it is opaque. There's a way to find out on your actual tubes. You might find though that in the past Winsor & Newton older tubes, this is all Winsor & Newton professional paint, and they're all slightly different packaging, and these do not have the little squares on them. So they've only recently started putting the squares on the tubes. Before you would have had to rely on going to the website or using their paint chart. So let's get on with our glazing itself. As I mentioned, the best paints to use for glazing are the transparent ones. Sometimes though they can be the more expensive paints, and so I'm just going to use what I've got on my palette. I've got some Winsor Yellow, so I'm going to pick some of that up. So I've moistened my brush. I'm going to add a few more drops of water on there because I want this to be quite a pale wash, and then I'm going to pick up some Winsor Yellow. We want this paint to be quite dilute in strength because a glaze is just that, it's a very thin veil of colour. But I want to make sure I've got a big enough puddle to cover the whole of that chicken's head and neck, because what I don't want is to have to go and mix up more colour part way through covering that bird's head and neck. So I'm constantly looking back and forth to see if I think I've got enough there. So I'm adding more and more water. You could spray some water on with your water spray onto the palette. That's another way of getting more water on. So that's a dilute wash, also known as a glaze. I can make it fractionally stronger, so again just a tiny little bit more paint. Use fine increments for this. What we don't want is a very dark puddle of colour. And what I'm going to do is very quickly start painting it on. I'll start from the palest colours of the bird. I'll start in the paler area because that won't pick up so much colour than if I started on the red beak. I'm putting this on as quickly and lightly as I can without scrubbing the previous wash. And already I'm noticing that the faint yellow that I'm putting on is adding a very gentle, very subtle, warmer feel to the chicken. It will start to dissolve ever so slightly, the wash underneath, but it'll be barely perceptible. So that's how I add a glaze to that chicken. And I'm going to look now at some other ones, and we'll come back and see what this looks like when it's had about 10 minutes or so to dry. And I'm keeping it flat to dry. For my next glazing, I've got this old picture of some bottles that I was trying out, and I fancy warming up this bottle in the front. This brush is a bit too small, so I'm going to move up now to a size 10 synthetic round brush. These are by the Master Touch Aquamarine by Curtis Ward, and they're really lovely brushes. So I'm going to moisten my brush, and this time I am going to get my water spray bottle because I want to put quite a bit of water in there, and it's quicker to spray it on than go back and forth from my water jug with my brush. I'll just wipe my handle because I've got a few blobs on there which I don't want to run down. So again, let's pick up some yellow to make this glaze. That's looking quite dilute. And I'm just pulling in some more blobs of water that are sitting on the palette just to dilute it down a bit more. And I think that's enough dilution and enough liquid to cover that bottle. So again, I'm going to apply this very swiftly. Of course, this painting is bone dry. It's been sitting in my painting box for weeks, and I felt that this front bottle looks very cold, and it could do with warming up because things that are warm come forward in a painting, don't they? Laying that wash on as gently as I can. In fact, let's warm up these garlic cloves as well and paint a yellow glaze on them. Maybe leave a little white chink on the right hand side where the light is catching them. Okay, so I've put a glaze all over that bottle now, and again we'll come back and see how that looks in a few minutes when it's had a chance to dry. I feel at the moment it looks more integrated into the painting now, doesn't it? Since it's had that warm up of colour, it looked a little bit apart. So glazing can be used to unify a painting. As I'm looking at the chicken now, again that actual glazing process has unified the bird as well. It can sort of fuse over any sort of little gaps that might be there in your painting and give the painting a feeling of wholeness as well. Another thing to know about glazing is that if you paint a glaze of yellow, which is a fine coating of yellow, and let that dry, and then paint a pale coating of pink over it, you'll get a different effect completely than if you mixed a glaze of yellow and added pink to it. So I'll show you what I mean. So this is the mix of yellow and pink together. They've been mixed together on the palette, okay? So let's bone dry this yellow and come along in a sec and just glaze some pink over that and see what the difference is. So now this swatch of yellow is bone dry, and that's the yellow and pink mix that I did together on the palette. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of water now and start mixing as dilute as I can the same sort of mix in the pink. So let's pick up some of this. This is Brilliant Purple, actually. It's a colour by Schminker. It's a very bright colour. So I'm going to dilute it down to about the same strength as the yellow was. And again, this is where in watercolour you've got to become quite sensitive. Use your powers of, judgment with regards to mixing. And this is what art is all about. You have to really be aware of how strong or dilute a wash is. I think those two are about on a par. So let's add that now on top of the yellow, which is bone dry. And there we are. As you can see, we're getting a slightly different feel. And the reason for that is because each colour has had a chance to sing its own song. Each voice of each colour has been able to sing and then be allowed to dry before another colour has gone on top. And that is why watercolourists do like to glaze. It takes a lot more time, but glazing allows each colour to sing its true colour on its own before it's mixed up and confused with another colour. There's an artist called Jean Dobie, and she is the expert on watercolour glazing, and her book, which I read 20 years ago, is all about that. There's a link to it in my description below, and just to mention, if you do buy it via that link, that's an affiliate link to my Amazon storefront, and I do get a percentage at no cost to you if you buy it. Okay, so just to let you know that. And that's a wonderful book if you're into this glazing idea. It's very subtle, and it does make your paintings more luminous, because when you're glazing you tend to mostly use the transparent paints. So let's just finish off by looking at our bottles. So that's how they're looking now with that warm yellow wash, the warm yellow glaze put on them. And as I mentioned, it can be a unifying technique using a glaze, because it's brought in the garlic bulbs to the bottle, and it's settled that bottle back in to the other bottles as well. And then finally the chicken head, that now has got a generally warmer cast than it had before, and I feel it's unified the head and the eye feathers a lot more. So I hope you found this useful. If you fancy treating yourself to a course this autumn, I've got a beginner's watercolour course starting online on the 1st of September. It's called Fanning the Flames of Fall, and in it I take you through everything as if you didn't know a thing about watercolour. I take you through brushes, paper, paint, materials, and all of the fundamental techniques for wetting the paper properly and mixing consistencies and dilutions of paint properly. If you want to find out more, click the link. And for this week I've got a code for £5 off. The code is Grateful5. I'm only taking 20 people on in this first group, and I've got 6 spaces left. So if you'd like to join us, please sign up, and if you've got any questions, email me at thepotteringartist@hotmail.com and I'll talk you through your needs. So again, thanks for watching, and try glazing, and again, this will help you get some good grist for the watercolour mill.